Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to the sheep pen, bah, where no goats are allowed. All right, so today we're going to talk about overcoming the enemy, and specifically how to bind a demon. What's the history of this? What is the purpose of it? Where does it fit into what I do and what I'm teaching you to do, which is self-exorcism, or even the act of delivering other people from demonic influences. And so the idea of binding a demon is different than exorcism. Exorcism is just telling that demon to get out. And ultimately, I go straight to that. I go straight to the eviction. But the Bible also tells us that some demons can only come out with prayer and fasting. Okay, some demons are more powerful than others. Now, having said that, some demons have such control over the host that you can't really get to the person enough to help them decipher how this demon got there and therefore cancel its right to be there and force it out when it doesn't want to leave and doesn't recognize your demand to leave. Now, this happened in the Bible. Jesus had to be summoned. He had to be brought by disciples to a scene of an exorcism because they had failed to drive the demon out. And it took Jesus himself to show up on the spot to do it. And in that, Jesus tells us, some demons only come out with prayer and fasting. And so it requires the cooperation of the host, of the person involved. And that's the only way you can truly drive demons away, is when you get the person on board with you. And sometimes you can't reach that person because the demonic is so in control of the individual. Now, I've talked about in previous episodes where medicines, psychiatric medicines rather, could be useful to, because when those medicines can numb down your ability to interact in the spirit world. And so that's a bad thing if you're trying to be a deeper, more powerful Christian, right? But it's a good thing if you're struggling against the demonic and you can't control them and you can't get free, because they can silence the demons by putting a cloud between the person and the spirit realm, right? Now, having said that, that requires a doctor getting involved. That requires some time to pass. So sometimes when you're faced with a demonic entity that must be dealt with right now, that is so powerful that you can't just take authority over it, that it fights you, it fights back, we'll put it that way, then you have to use a method called binding. Now, there's a rich history of this that goes all the way back to Solomon. Now, I want to put up a warning here. Okay, what I'm about to share with you now is esoteric and occultic in nature and is not found in the Bible. These are extra biblical documents. And I want to specifically, in referring, because I'm going to talk to you about Solomon. And what we're going to discuss is Solomonic demonology or Solomonic magic. And because it's at this point in history, it seems to be where the idea of binding demons and having that authority over demons comes from. It comes from Solomon. And so I'm going to be referencing a book, and I don't want you to get it confused with a different book, okay? So there are two main books concerning Solomon. Book number one is called The Testament of Solomon. This tells the story of Solomon's interaction with, control of, and manipulation of demons, okay? And the role that they played in the building of the Jewish temple. All right. Now, Solomon's temple, and then so that book is just the story, right? It tells the story of each demon. It tells the story of how he tricked them, basically got control of them, and where his power and authority came from God, obviously, but how that all worked is all in that story, the Testament of Solomon. But you don't want to get that confused with the Lesser Key of Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon is a black magic manual, okay? What they basically do is they take the methods of Solomon's control of demons, his binding of demons, and they turn it into conjuring and the conjuring of demons. Now, Aleister Crowley is probably the most famous user of the Lesser Key of Solomon and its magical rites that are recorded in that book that only dates back to the 1700s, or the 17th century, the 1600s. The 1600s in England gives birth to this composite book called the Lesser Key of Solomon, and that's become a black magic manual. And I don't suggest you read it, and I don't suggest that you get involved deeply in that in any way, because it leads towards black magic, witchcraft of the highest level. Now, having said that, and I don't even know that book actually originates anywhere near Judea, okay, that it's a European, seems to be a European manual, maybe actually even Greek in origin. Now, having said that, the other book that we are talking about is the Testament of Solomon, and this seems to be around the 1st century AD, or the time of Christ. The book itself comes at it from a position of Judaism, right? It's supposedly written originally in Hebrew, although no Hebrew translation survived of it. But it's Greek for the most part, and it seems to be early Christian Greek. Okay, maybe, I mean, some say that it's Gnostic in origin. I'll give you an idea there. Now, having said that, it comes across as Jewish, although it alludes to Jesus coming in the future. Although most scholars agree that this is going to be written post-Jesus by somebody who's trying to set it up, make it look like it comes from pre-Jesus times. But what you have is this very interesting story of the history of demonology. And it goes into detail about how part of the wisdom that Solomon received from God, King Solomon in the Old Testament, that part of that was the understanding and the controlling of and binding of and use of demons as slave labor. And that the idea is that Solomon got this wisdom from God. And when he began to encounter demons who were apparently loose in the world, like I say, like today, right? I say today, it's not been since ancient times. When I say ancient times, I'm talking about the times of Solomon, the times of the owl demon. What's its name? Moloch. These Moloch and Baal worshippers of the day, right? This time of Solomon in ancient days. Violence was everywhere. It was a normal part of life. Murder was as common as anything. It could happen right in front of you, and did on a regular basis. There really wasn't any law beyond an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And so there was this chaos and destruction and evilness in the world. And evil religions like Baal and Moloch worship, where children were sacrificed by the thousands to these to this owl god. This stuff was just commonplace in the world, and we're headed back to that kind of thing again. All of those missing children, the missing and exploited children on the back of the milk cartons from back in the day, all of this stuff that we've gotten used to. I can tell you where they're going and what they're doing with those kids. The same thing they were doing with them back then. This is all devil worship. This is all demon worship. So this was the environment that Solomon finds himself when he's trying to build the temple, and he's besought God for wisdom, and God is rewarding him with wisdom. And what happens is one of Solomon's people come to him for help. Come to the king and say, hey, I'm being demonized at night. And so the very first foray into demonology by Solomon is in answer to this despair and this cry for help. And so Solomon prays to God that he would be given authority and power over demons, so he could put an end to this torture and torment of this person. And so it says in this that then God sends the archangel Michael with a special ring that gives Solomon power over demons. Okay? And so Solomon uses the ring to gain control of this demon that's tormenting this man and sets the person free. And now he has control of this demon. He's bound him. one of the things that's a reoccurring theme in this kind of stuff is iron, chains of iron, that you bind them in chains of iron. I found some exorcism manuals and rituals and rites from the Coptic Church that specifically talk about binding these demons with chains and fetters, Adamic fetters. This is one of the things I've been talking about, that we, by the nature of being the sons of Adam, are the rightful children of this earth, and therefore we have authority over these demons. They just won't recognize it, right? And so we have to have angelic backup. We don't have a magic ring like Solomon had, right? But we have the right to do this, and we are aided then by angelic help. And this is something that is proved out in the Gospels and proved out in the book of Acts in the Bible, that we see as believers that we have the authority to trample on demons. We have the authority to bring demons under our subjection and to free people from the horrible demonic influence in the world. And this is something that Christians have been doing in the pattern of and by the example of Jesus Christ. And it has continued down through time, but its origins go all the way back to Solomon. But there is a morality tale in this Solomonic magic, because Solomon doesn't stop there. Once he's freed the individual and he has the demon chained in iron, okay? And I can tell you that when you use this binding method that I will allude to but not give too many specific details on, when you use this binding method, it drives the demons crazy. There's something about iron that burns their skin. And I know you're saying, Sage, are you saying you actually chain people up? No. I'm saying you paint a picture and you command that these demons be bound in iron shackles, that they be chained in the chains of the angelic, in the chains of God, under this authority that we've been given, and by the power vested in us as kings and priests. All of this stuff, right? I've heard these demons, though, when you do this, they do not like it. They'll start yelling, "It burns, it burns." Now, I don't let this continue, because you're going to learn as I teach you this, that when that starts to happen, I silence them. I don't let demons carry on and manifest. But I do find it interesting that every time I've brought this binding method against them, they complain about the chains burning them. Loosen my chains, loosen my chains. And it causes the person in the deliverance chair to sit there and squirm and pull like their skin's on fire. So, at any rate, Solomon's used the magic ring, right, that was brought to him by the archangel Michael to bind this demon, and he doesn't stop there. He gets the demon to tell him all his secrets, to tell him the structure of demonology, to tell him the history of the demons, where they come from. All this stuff is in the book. It's quite fascinating to read into this book. And if you're not a big reader and you want a digested version of this, I recommend the YouTube channel Esoterica. This is, I believe he's a rabbi of sorts, but he's definitely a Hasidic Jew with wears the Jew hat, right? The Jewish, the yarmulke. He wears the yarmulke all the time. And he's credited as being a doctor. I don't think he claims to be a rabbi, but nonetheless, I think he's qualified. He definitely knows a lot about the occult and esoteric religious practices, rituals. So at any rate, back to the testament of Solomon. In this story, Solomon starts to kind of lose his way, because he decides to conjure up the principal demon, the boss demon of all of them. And you'll notice throughout this that in the book, in these videos based on the books, you will hear lots of demonic names and lots of seals and images and monikers that are supposed to represent these demon entities, and I don't repeat them. I don't want to ever conjure one up. I don't ever want to get their attention, right? It's not what I'm trying to do. And it's not that I'm afraid of them. It's just that I have a mission, and that's not on my mission right now. If it ever was, I would. But to tell you the truth, I want to educate people, because you don't, like I said, you don't have to know these demons' names. You do not have to know their name. You can identify them by their job description, right? By the thing that they do. Also, in one of these Coptic exorcism rites that I've studied, they don't even name the demon. They're like, whoever you are, by whatever names you're known. Like, they don't even care. They're just like, whoever, whatever demon you're the one that's afflicting my brother. I'm talking to you, right? And if that's the kind of language in these rites, I told you, demons, they like to go, he's not talking to me, he's talking to that devil, not me, right? That they'll do anything to not acknowledge a direct command from someone who has the authority to command them. And that's what I'm telling you. You have the authority to command these demons, just like Jesus commanded that they go into the swine when he delivered the demoniac and put the multitude of demons that was possessing that man into this herd of pigs, and they ran themselves off a cliff and committed pig suicide. And so, yeah, this stuff is real. You have the power to defeat these things, but you have to be careful, because you'll fall prey to what happened to Solomon, because Solomon took it too far, right? And it's because Solomon was a righteous man in the eyes of God, except he had a couple of weaknesses. It's the same weakness that all men suffer from. Greed, right? Enough is never enough. And lust. You know, you got to have that hot new thing. And so this was Solomon's downfall, but more about that later. So Solomon conjures up the master demon and enslaves him using the ring of Michael. And he, once again, picks his brain about how the demonic works until he has lured in, conjured in, right, and bound and taken control of every principal archdemon in the book. Now, the result of this for Solomon was that the binding of these demons took them off of their grind, right? It took them off of their daily job of tormenting and devouring the innocent in the world. And so the net result of this demon binding that Solomon did, for whatever reason he did it, the result was demon-free zone in Israel, right? That you had a period now of peace and prosperity under Solomon that the region had never seen. And it was because these principal demons had been harnessed, had been bound in chains by Solomon, right? Through the power of this ring that was given to him by Michael the archangel. Now, I find the book so interesting because there's a chess game. These demons are very smart. They're very schooled. And they know more about this stuff than Solomon does. But Solomon's got that ring, right? He's got that ultimate power and control over him. It's forcing them to tell the truth. It's forcing the truth out of them. But yet at the same time, they're so cunning that they're always working against him. One in particular claims that five locusts will be the end of him, that will undo him. He'll be undone by 5 locusts. More about that later. So Solomon sees the opportunity once he captures these demons to put them to work for him. So he torments and tortures them and forces them to work in manual labor building the temple. And so this giant, in some cases, monolithic stone, like the cornerstone, for instance, is so huge. How did they move it? Solomon got these demons to move it. He got a jinn from the Arabian Peninsula in particular to come and set the cornerstone at the, this is according to this 2,000-year-old document, okay? So at any rate, I'm just telling the story, but it also has there's an element of this that is at the basis of all exorcists and all exorcist methods and methodologies, that this must be true because we walk it out still to this day. Exorcists walk out these methods to this day. We just don't take it as far as Solomon did, right? So Solomon got them to tell him where all the gold mines were, where all of the gold deposits were. And he was able to unearth all of these natural resources that no one else knew where to find them because the demons did. And this becomes an obsession with Solomon, and his greed gets stronger and stronger until he is eventually seduced by a witch, a woman whose family and culture worship Moloch. Entrances Solomon, and Solomon becomes obsessed with her. But they will not let him sleep with her or take her as a wife, right? These people will not give her up, and she won't give herself to him, right? Unless he makes a sacrifice to Moloch, which Solomon will not do, because, that would be denouncing his God. And there shall be no, he doesn't worship any God but the God of Isaac and Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? The God of Israel. And so Solomon refuses, okay? But he's still obsessed with this woman. He cannot get enough. He just has to have her. He can't live without her. He's got thousands of wives. The most beautiful women on earth are at his disposal. But this one has entranced him. Now, it's at the manipulation of this demon that is now bound and enslaved to Solomon, the demon I spoke of that talked about the 5 locusts, right? So this is the demon behind this enchantment, this Moloch woman who was trying to get Solomon to denounce God and to make a sacrifice to Moloch. And he refuses to do it. And so she comes to him in the night, and she tempts him, and she seduces him, and she says, I'll lay with you if you just take these 5 locusts and crush them in the name of Moloch. And Solomon looks at such a small thing. They're just locusts. They're bugs. I step on 5 bugs a day, no problem. If they were laying there, I'd just crush them. And so he's like, what can it hurt? And then I get to have her. And so he crushes the 5 locusts she brought him in the name of Moloch. And in that moment, the Spirit of God leaves Solomon. In some tellings of this, it goes into detail about how a demon then overtook Solomon, and Solomon became an evil ruler, and at the end of his life was under great torment, and everything that he had done and he had accomplished through the help of these jinn, right, had all been erased in a day when the power of God left him, because all of those demons were only being bound by the power of God. It wasn't Solomon's power that bound the demons. It was Solomon's favor with God that allowed him to bind those demons and to manipulate and to control them and to conjure more into his service and slavery. But those bonds, those imaginary iron bars and shackles that held these demons in the spirit realm, bound to Solomon, they were all freed the instant he crushed those 5 locusts, and the Spirit of God departed from him. And then this lays the groundwork for future curses to fall upon the entire nation of Israel because of Solomon's corruption. So that's just a little story time there for you. Now, having said that, what does the purpose and reasoning behind binding demons, what role does that play in the role of an exorcist? I'm going to share with you a story that demonstrates this. And I've talked about it before. When the person is unable to communicate with you because of the interference from the demon, that this is when a binding technique can be employed. And I find it really interesting that I learned this from exorcists in the Christian faith, Orthodox exorcists, okay, Catholic exorcists. But much of this ideology and language goes clear back to that 2,000-year-old pre-Christian church, really, story of the Testament of Solomon. And so, nonetheless, I was very schooled in and aware of and knew when to utilize binding of demons. I don't do it all the time, and the reason is because it really causes the person to manifest. Like, demons do not like that iron on their skin. They do not like those shackles holding them, and they claim that it burns. Take the shackles off. They burn. Loosen them. They're tightening me. They're tightening on me. If you're a fan of the channel, you know I wrote a song called "The Exorcist from Texas," And in it, I say, can you hear the demons crying as their chains tighten? Something like that. As their chains, I don't know. I have to look it up. But if you want to go find that song, it's in my music section, my music, Sage Original Music. You'll find that in there. But nonetheless, I talk about that in the song. That nothing will make demons cry out in pain more than being bound. You can take authority over them. They don't like it. They'll sit there like a kid in the principal's office and shut up while you talk. But the more powerful ones, the more surly ones, the more rebellious ones, you have to bind them. And it's when the fight really thickens sometimes. And I'll give you an example. I was a very busy regional youth director. It was my annual youth camp, and it was my first year, and I was, to say I was stressed out and worn thin and running on empty by midweek is an understatement. It was my first time to handle that many, over 100 kids, and yes, I had other volunteers and helpers, but ultimately it was on me. I was in one of the big dormitories, and see, I learned later on to delegate things like this, but back then I was doing everything on my own because I had the power and the strength and energy to do it because I was 20 something or 30 something, I was 32, I think. But anyway, so I was doing something I should have delegated to somebody else to do, but I was restocking the refrigerator with all these cans of sodas late at night after the kids had already kind of settled in and mostly gone to bed, and I was still up, taking care of business. So I standing there stocking these sodas when a young man, and I think I might have talked about this before, I think there's a video on this where I took a pedophile off the street. But I knew this boy was demonized. I just didn't know how bad. And he came in there weeping, and he stumbled in kind of incoherent, and he says, "Pastor, you got to help me. You got to help me. The demons are eating me alive. You got to help me." And so I was able to put a binding spell, if you want to call it that. That's what magicians would call it. I call it a prayer. A binding prayer, a proclamation on the demonic spirits associated with that boy. And I bound them. And of course, he did a lot of the manifestation. I said, and I came back with, "You will not manifest. You'll stay silent." And I was able then to talk to the boy and to get the boy talking to me. And it was at this point where he was, I think, almost 18. He confessed to being obsessed with pedophilia. He was plotting to kidnap, rape, and murder the 4-year-old girl that lived next door. And I was able to use these methods to bind the demon and shut him up and get the boy to come forward, the child to come forward and speak to me and confess to me, not just what he was struggling with, but what he was planning to do. And of course, I was able to involve his parents in that situation, and a psychologist and law enforcement, as I am required to do when someone tells me they're planning a crime. So an imminent crime is about to occur. I have to intervene. And so all of that happened in a really kind of discreet, under the table Texas sort of let's not embarrass anybody way. But the boy was put on drugs that caused him to be basically chemically castrated. So it removed his ability to do any of those things and the urges physically. So, and then he also went into counseling, right, and into prayer ministry. And his exorcism was completed by someone else, not by me. But I started the process by binding that demon spirit. And it was probably the first time I really saw one come unhinged from the iron touching their skin. And I don't know why iron is important, but it is. That the chains be of iron. That they be angelic in nature, administered by angels. I'm going to give you the prayer that will authorize angels to bind these demons hand and foot. To put an iron bit in their mouth so they can't speak. So it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's very graphic. It's a very graphic description. The prayer is a very graphic description of binding this demon and holding him and preventing him from operating or even speaking. And so a lot of people will say, I bind you in Jesus' name. There's more to it, right? And you got to know what demon you're dealing with. You got to zero in on it. You don't have to know its name. You just have to know its function, right? Or I guess you don't if you believe the Coptic, some of the Coptic churches' documents where they just say stuff like, you demon afflicting so-and-so, insert name here, you demon, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, you the one that's messing with him. I'm talking to you. Which I found really kind of interesting it kind of came at it from every angle. It's like written into the prayer is the demon's denials. It's like, who, me? You're not talking to me. You're talking to that other demon, not me. No, me? No, not me. Him, right? Not me. Nuh-uh. I'm not, la, 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 I don't hear you. That's how they are. I tell you what, they get serious real fast when you pray that binding prayer and take control of them through angelic intervention. So the thing that we have to be concerned with, though, is that this not be taken so far as to be abused. And the difference between what I'm telling you and black magic is this fine line. What I do, what other exorcists do, is that we control the demonic to stop their interference in the lives of humans, right? Black magicians will go down that road of greed and selfishness, and they will use the demonic power, and they will conjure demons out of nowhere, not just deal with demons that they're encountering that are involved in an act of persecution against another Christian, right, or another person that needs help. Not just those kind of interactions. They will seek out and conjure demons to try to force them into their will. Of course, just like the old genie stories, the genie will always outsmart you, and you'll end up worse off than you were before, and you won't get the things that you wanted. And this morality tale is kind of told in its totality in the Testament of Solomon, this ancient story, whether it be true or not. But spiritually, it's been proven out. These techniques do work. You know, people do conjure demons and get demons to do things for them, but in the end, they always lose. It's like making a deal with the devil. You get rich and famous, but the devil gets your soul. So, that 27 Club thing. You can't dance with the devil. The devil doesn't change. The devil changes you. So the best way to deal with these demons is to bind them in Jesus' name, cast them out, sick angels on their butt, and drive them as far away from you as you can get them to go. I will tell you this, if you bind a demon, you better unbind him and cast him out at some point. Because if you leave a person bound, it causes, I think over time, it can cause mental illness. If you don't come back and relieve the pressure, if you don't give this person total deliverance, they still have a demon living inside them, except this demon is now bound in iron and not very happy about it. And it can cause all kinds of problems. So if you ever do a binding, then cast the devil out of the person. Don't leave a person bound, right? It torments the human as well. So, and it defeats the purpose, which is to give them peace. I ask for your support on this channel. I can't do this without you. If you like these videos, if you're learning things, if you're getting something from this, if you're growing spiritually in any way, I ask that you support this channel financially. There's a PayPal link in the description. You can send stuff to the P.O. Box, or you can write me an email and talk, right? Or send me a letter. Love gift cards. Send me gift cards. Thank you to the person that gave me the Cracker Barrel and Walmart gift cards. I don't call people out by name, but thank you. You know who you are, and your handwriting is really nice. Thank you. It's beautiful. So, at any rate, so I will leave you today with this blessing, this powerful prayer of protection. May the Lord surround you in his ring of fire and hedge of thorns of protection. May he send angels, mighty angels of sufficient rank, authority, and number to drive the enemy from your midst. And may you be engulfed in the peace of God, the peace that surpasses all understanding. And we'll see you next time on the Sheep Pen, where goats are definitely not allowed.